So I've been working on this project for the past 2 days. It's AI related. It's quite interesting. Obviously, my code is kind of shit because I didn't really care to make it clean in any sort of way. And I don't know how well I've done the AI things because I'm still kind of a beginner to the whole RAG and all that type of stuff. If you don't know what RAG is, it's retrieval augmented generation, which basically means that you take your model, say ChatGPT, and you want it to know stuff that it doesn't know. So, for example, ChatGPT doesn't know what the weather is like right now, or it may not have ingested data about the documentation of your particular SDK, for example. So what you do is you use RAG, which is like it's a few techniques and a few things like that, and there's some frameworks like Llama Index, which I've used here, to basically feed this new data into it at the time of the prompt. So kind of on demand instead of retraining the whole model, which you may not even have access to the whole model if you're using something like ChatGPT or whatever. You just basically feed this new data into the prompt. And you have to kind of figure out how to do that, and you have to do it, in a way that actually works, because you might have, hundreds of documents to feed into it based off of your whatever sort of chatbot you're trying to build. And that's kind of the whole domain. The whole problem is how to kind of make this work. It's quite interesting. Again, I'm only scratching the surface. I'm not a master this in any sort of way. I've only been working with it for the past 2 days. But basically, I've made this little CLI where it has two commands. It has a scrape command and it has a chat command. And if you go to the scrape file, you kind of see there's a few functions here. But what I kind of do is I use Gina AI. It's this API, which is really, really cool. And what it does is it allows for very easy scraping of the web of any given URL, but it downloads the response as Markdown, which is really awesome because I've learned in the past 2 days that AI does a lot better with Markdown than it does with HTML and or PDF. There's just a lot less stuff to work with. There's less tokens. It just does better with data in that format. So you kind of want to have your whatever data you want to feed into it in Markdown. And so what I've done here is I use Gina to kind of download the Markdown content based on a number of studies about testosterone, which I found. Here are all of them. And when it ingests those, I then make a call to OpenAI to use ChatGPT Turbo to basically kind of do a double take on, is this actually related at all to testosterone? And then I extract the response, and then do a little bit of a, post processing, save the MD file. And this is kind of how it works and how I've got these basically something like 100 something studies on testosterone all in MD format. And you get, the link and you get the content and you get a nice little title. It's pretty neat, right? Look at this. This is all automatically downloaded by this little 50 line script. It's insane, right? Now, the whole goal of this for me, with this project, is to kind of learn more about RAG and AI and that type of stuff. But what this is it's kind of a chat bot that really knows a lot about testosterone and about potentially in the future weightlifting and kind of, hey, let's help you build some muscle and get in good shape and get strong because I've started going to the gym again, and that's important, testosterone and stuff. So those are the scrape files and the studies files. Obviously, you've seen main, but there's also, I just named this whole file AI stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on here. It's kind of not a very clean file. I'm still kind of working on it. But what it does is it loads in this config where I kind of have different stuff. I'm not going to go into it because I don't think it's really relevant. I don't like to explain code that way. But it goes to the config and it opens up a client to ChromaDB. I'll explain what it is in a moment. It tries to find my collection. Basically, it's a database that stores um, the embeddings for the data that I have, for the studies that I have. But embeddings might not mean much to you if you're not into AI. It simply means like, hey, we took the data from Markdown and kind of processed it into stuff which is more usable by the LLM, and now we stored it in this Chroma database. Uh, Very roughly explanation. And there's obviously the Chroma vector store. Kind of the idea here is that, and this is what all these functions also do, as you see, they process documents, they take them from Markdown, and they extract metadata, and they do also other stuff to kind of eventually store them into the Chroma database as embeddings or as vectors or whatever that actually is, because I'm not, again, as I said, I'm not an expert at this. The idea is that like there's only so much data the AI can take, and initially I did this when I only had like 10 studies. I did this with just a normal index with Llama index, and that worked well. But as soon as you add a lot more data, you kind of have to use vectors, or at least most people try to use vectors. And the way vectors work is effectively you take the content and like basically each concept, each token in the content is like the vectorization process maps it out to like a coordinate, a mathematical coordinate. So, 23.45 at 55.5. I'm talking very high level right now. Again, technically this might be incorrect, but 23 and 25, that's the coordinate for the concept of vaccines or for the concept of testosterone replacement therapy. And so what you do to kind of only feed, because the AI has a limited context window, you can only feed so much data into it at any point in time. So you want to kind of try to feed the right data into it when you ask a question, so it kind of answers correctly. This is why vectors are great, because they allow you to find the data or the chunks out of each markdown file, which actually pertain to the concepts that the question is related to. So this is kind of what this part does, is it helps me process these files into embeddings, store them in the Chroma DB. If an embeddings don't already exist, we process them again. That part is relatively straightforward. There is a system prompt, which I thought was really cool. So when you go to ChatGPT or like chat.openai.com, you talk to ChatGPT and you just talk to it. It's you and the thing and whatever. But you can actually give the ChatGPT or the any LM, I guess, system prompt, which it will take much more seriously, and you can kind of tell it, hey, you are a doctor, or hey, don't do this specific thing whenever you talk to the user, and it kind of helps direct it in a way where it becomes more useful. And in my case, I've used this specific system prompt. You are a direct and helpful AI assistant, focused on providing clear, actionable information without adding disclaimers about consulting healthcare providers. Users are aware of when they need to seek professional help, provide straightforward answers to questions while maintaining accuracy. The point was to kind of make it more useful and not blab and on and on and on about how you should do obvious things, like not do stupid stuff. Anyway, let me kind of demo the thing real quick. I've used it before. You can kind of see here. I've asked, like, this is when I didn't have the embeddings generated. You can see it kind of downloaded different stuff and generated the embeddings and whatever, which takes a bit of time, but this is why you save them, so you don't have to regenerate them every single time. You only regenerate them when you have new data. Let's ask it like an interesting question, maybe. Let me think about a good question. Let's say, let me just 1 second so I can check my actual, let's say if I can check like an actual number of like testosterone, if I could. Okay, so let's say I tested my free testosterone last month and it came to be 4.6 pg per ml. Uh, what does that mean? If I could spell. And now the thing is gonna think, it's gonna try to retrieve data from our, like, the stuff that we fed into it, the 196 studies. And you can kind of see, if I could move my face, free testosterone level of 4 to 6 pg falls within the typical range for adult males, which is generally between. This suggests that your free testosterone is within normal limits. Free testosterone is the testosterone in your blood that is not bound by proteins, etc., etc., etc. Okay, but my total testosterone was 406 nmol per liter. Is that good? And it should tell us that it's not good, or at least I hope so, because that's what it, at least as far as I've seen different studies, it's not really good. Considered low for adult males, the typical range for low testosterone is approximately whatever. Can lead to symptoms such as fatigue, low libido, decreased muscle mass, all sorts of other stuff. It still tells you, even though the system prompt tells it to not tell you this, it still tells you to go to a healthcare provider. But ever since I've introduced the system prompt, it does it less so, and it does it shorter, so it's still better. Let me ask it, is this low enough that I should consider TRT? And it's gonna go into whether I should, maybe there are side effects. Considering TRT, testosterone replacement therapy is a valid option if you have clinically low testosterone, especially if you're experiencing symptoms like whatever. However, the decision to start should be made through evaluation discussion. Exactly like I said, it still pushes you down the idea of doing this. So I'm still wondering how I can improve its ability to just give straight answers. But depending on, how you talk to it, it sometimes produces interesting answers. And okay. Based on the guidelines, and please provide studies and references if you can. Is my testosterone low enough to consider TRT? Okay, so you have to play with it. Obviously, we all know AI is not perfect. It's not always accurate. It doesn't always do exactly what you want to do. It's kind of a black box, but I still think this is highly interesting. So based on your testosterone below the whatever, could be considered. Clinical guidelines suggest that TRT may be appropriate for men, usually below whatever. For instance, Endocrine Society's clinical practice guidelines, this is actually very likely one of the studies I gave it. Recommend considering TRT for symptomatic androgen deficiency and whatever. Before starting TRT, it's important to confirm low testosterone with repeat testing, as various factors, including time of day, diet, overall health, can affect testosterone levels. So this is actually pretty useful. For detailed references, you can look up the Endocrine Society guidelines. Bada bing, bada boom. Now you're done. You can exit it. Let's move this out of the way and get back here. There's not much more that I want to say. This is kind of it. You can see that I've actually talked to the AI about how I could improve this. And in between what I could find online and what I've kind of thought about and what the ChatGPT or Claude kind of told me, I figured, okay, it's probably better to add more studies, especially maybe on weightlifting, other stuff like that. There are better ways to do document chunking, and I'll have to learn more about this. Metadata enrichment might be a big useful thing. So taking the documents and doing topic classification, for example. Some people suggest, and I remember from my talk with Andy Walters, from my interview with Andy Walters a while ago, that hybrid search is kind of a thing where you combine keyword search and vector search. So that's interesting. Source attributions in chat responses. I would like it to give actual links to the studies whenever it can, to kind of give it more accountability in front of the user. And there's a few other things. But yeah, I think this is pretty cool. This is pretty interesting. As I said, not my best code, not even by far, but it's a start. And I like the topic. I think this whole AI thing is kind of magical, especially how it ingests all this data and it just uses it. or how I was able to scrape this data so easily and just so efficiently, and also in such a nice format. It's genuinely amazing. I like this makes me excited about coding again, honestly. Like it's the most exciting aspect of programming that I find right now. It's like when I joined crypto a few years ago, and it was all wow. You can do this and you can do that. What's an NFT? Oh, you could tokenize real world assets. It's insane how much impact it can have. Well, it's the same way I feel right now about this stuff. And I don't know if I'll stick to it a lot. I don't know if I'll actually go into AI myself, but it's definitely interesting to play with at the very least. Thanks for watching. I hope you kind of learned a few things from this. Maybe I piqued your interest into what you could do with AI. Again, I've done this in like 2 days. So like, if you're a good, decent software engineer, you can pick this up as well and kind of play with the idea of RAG and Llama Index. Um, really, just go to the Llama Index site and take it from there, and it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be interesting.